everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. And today I want to revisit an age-old adage in the kink community. Submissives have all the power. Is this statement actually true? And if it's not, why do we say it? What might be a better alternative? And where the heck did this phrase even come from in the first place? I actually found some really interesting answers to these questions I did not expect. So with that being said, let's get into it. And first of all, if you have been in the community for any length of time, and you have even a passing interest in power exchange, you have no doubt heard the phrase, submissives have all the power, or some variant like, the submissive is really the one in control. Heck, even if you aren't in the community, you may have heard it during one of the many public debates about dominance and submission that have occurred over the years on social media. It's treated as an evergreen retort to the accusation that BDSM is all about men beating up on hapless, helpless women who have been brainwashed into thinking that they need to be controlled. Some member of the anti-kink coalition on Tumblr or RadFem on Twitter will say something along those lines, to which a kinky person will then go, "I'm not doing anything I don't want to do. I'm actually the one who's really in control. My dom only has power over me because I let them. It's all pretend. Stop freaking out over nothing." And while that may be personally true for that individual, it rarely does anything to quell the conversation at hand. That hasn't stopped this particular sentiment from sticking around, though. While it's not a compelling argument when it comes to changing the minds of devoted kink critical types, it is often effectively used to soothe the worries of new kinksters and the kink curious. Someone who might be interested in being a submissive may rightly worry, wait, is it really safe to give all of my power to someone else? It seems scary to lose control like that. Because, yeah, giving up all of your power and autonomy to someone else is scary. It can go wrong. So to help reassure folks like this, many will say, don't worry, the submissive is actually the one who's in control. The dominant can only be your dominant when you choose to submit. You decide whether play is allowed to happen or not. You negotiate for everything you want to have happen, and you have a safe word, and you can end the scene or relationship at any time. This is the essence of what many people mean by submissives have the power, and that helps people feel a little better about dipping their toes into power exchange. They don't fear anymore that they're gonna suddenly completely lose themselves forever because they wanted to try being walked on a leash. And that's all well and good, but despite the fact that this phrase has, let's say, well-meaning intentions and does have a lot of utility in some cases, it also has problems.
And before we get into exactly what those problems are, I want to stop for a moment and talk to you all about today's sponsor, BEDUCATED. You all likely already know because we've been working with BEDUCATED for a while, but they are genuinely one of my favorite resources online for adult intimacy education. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of it is that their content is very inclusive. Another big part of that is just the size of their offerings catalog. They have so much really good material on their website. So I wanted to stop and highlight something that I think really goes along with this conversation that I think is a little bit of a hidden gem. So they have a video that's about BDSM relationship advice, and it's definitely for people that are into BDSM, yes, but it's also for really anybody that might be struggling with things like communication barriers or power struggles in their relationship. Again, whether it's kinky or vanilla. And when we're talking about things like, do submissives have all of the power or not, I think this goes right along with that. And what I really like about a class like this is it really highlights the importance of going beyond those comforting but ultimately overly simplistic thoughts that we use to soothe ourselves when we're afraid of things like submissives have all the power, and helps us learn how to step into actually deeper intimacy that's very real and genuine in our dynamics because it's based on a level of trust and clarity of how we're coming into the relationship and what we ultimately want out of it. So if that resonates with you, I would definitely recommend checking out this course as well as any of the other courses on BEDUCATED's website. They seriously have something for everyone on there, I am certain. And if you would like to check them out, you can go to the link in my description box. It's only using that link, by the way, and you can use the code Evie Lupine at checkout, EVIELUPINE, to get BEDUCATED for only $8.33 a month. And they have as well, on top of that, some amazing additional offers, like you can get the first 24 hours for free, and they also have a 14-day money-back guarantee as always. So if you would like to check them out, again, the link is down below using code Evie Lupine at checkout. Thank you so much to BEDUCATED for sponsoring the video, and now let's get back into it.
The most immediate one that comes to mind is that it makes a definite, universal statement about how power exchange works for all S-types. That is rarely a good thing to do, as it creates a binary, thought-terminating cliche that doesn't leave room for other approaches. Being an S-type, being the one to give up power and or authority to someone else, is a massive spectrum, especially when it comes to people's feelings and internal psychological assessments of how their relationships function. While there are certainly people who do feel like they retain ultimate power or control within their dynamics, that is not the case for everyone. The feeling that, well, actually, I am the one calling the shots at the end of the day is often more prominent amongst those who play on the lighter end of the DS spectrum, which is not bad, by the way. Think of people who use DS more as a side dish to their impact play or bondage, or folks who only do it every once in a while or only in the bedroom. Because it's not a major continual part of every facet of their lives, it does feel like something that is more on when they want it to be and off when they don't. But for others, power exchange is their lived reality. They go through intensive behavior modification and training every day and give up complete authority over everyday decisions to their D-type partner. This is where the authority transfer folks will also come in and remind me that they also make a large distinction between authority and power, and that actually they do retain their power, but they are giving authority over themselves to another person, just to add yet another perspective to this equation that should be considered. But the point being is that for many people who engage in what I would call high-level power exchange, their psychological reality is that they have given up total or near total control to someone else, even if technically it could be true that they might use safe words or have limits in place still. And that's the point. Does it matter if you technically still have some control over your situation because you can still revoke consent at any time if your day-to-day experience makes you feel like you've given up total control? And what about the people who have chosen to give up tools like safe words in their relationship? Because those people also exist. Free use, CNC, and no limits-based submission is still submission, even if those things are less socially acceptable on the surface than the reassuring, don't worry, we're just acting, I actually call the shots, type approach. Furthermore, a phrase like the submissive has all the power not only misrepresents the breadth of power exchange to the public, but it also misrepresents what is possible to other kinksters. People may falsely believe that the types of relationships they want can only ever happen in a fantasy, or that they need to hide their desires and part of themselves for fear of being ostracized. It contributes to the stigma surrounding extreme power exchange, both within and without the community. And all that does is make it harder for people who want such relationships to find supportive, open spaces. That in turn makes vetting more difficult and prevents people from having easy access to a sounding board of like-minded individuals who can help them if something doesn't feel right. And I think we can all agree that is an outcome that we should avoid. We should not be preventing people from getting access to community spaces, help, and support. But the problem with this phrase doesn't stop there. It's something I noticed early in my kink journey, like 7 or 8 years ago. If you were around then, you might have noticed it too. Do you all remember how educational accounts on Tumblr would say things like, they have to give you aftercare, or they're abusing you, or the submissive has to have limits and safe words, etc.? Those sentiments reflect a lopsided view of submission that is also reflected in stating that the S-type is the one with all of the power. Everything is focused on the S-type, positioning the D-type as sort of an unshakable, almost inhuman force that can't really be hurt, abused, used, or anything else. So much so that including them in a conversation about folks needing to have limits and safe words and aftercare is superfluous. I mean, you maybe might have gotten someone saying, oh yeah, and D-types also need aftercare, just as a side note, and that was really the best you could hope for. The D-type is, at best, from that perspective, an agent who helps the submissive have the experience they want to have. They're a facilitator, not a co-equal partner who also has human needs and limits and desires and boundaries. By saying the S-type has all of the power, we're also saying, implicitly, that the D-type has none of the power. They have no agency, no standing in this arrangement outside of what they can provide to the submissive. Is that really what we should be communicating? Is that a good idea? I don't think that's the intention, but that's how it comes across. And there are some people who this might describe. There are many an otherwise vanilla person who has decided to play act at being dominant in order to please their kinky spouse. They might be passive, they might just be going with the flow, but if they thought that they had no power in that situation, if they felt they had to say yes, that would be dangerous. We might rightly call that dominance under duress and label it as coercive because it is. Dominants can also be threatened, hurt, pressured, and coerced into doing activities they don't want to do because they're human beings, not robots. Dominants also deserve aftercare, safe words, limits, and boundaries as well, if they want those things. Dominants are not unthinking, unfeeling kink dispensers, and the sad reality is that many D-types feel that in order to be a good dom, they must do whatever their partners want. They too have bought into the idea that doms just kind of get their dominant needs met along the way by just merely being the one to take control, and they shouldn't be picky about how that happens. A dominant should just be happy because, well, they get to be in charge, and they should just be satisfied when their partner says they want to hand over control of their clothing choices, their eating habits, or their sexuality. The idea that a real dom might not care about these things or have their dominance fed by them is not accounted for in this narrative, and that's only reinforced by the notion that the submissive is and ought to be the one who is really calling the shots. Almost as though people believe that if the dom was the one calling the shots, or at least had equal say, they would of course run roughshod over the S-type, trying to control every little thing. D-type in control? That would be dangerous, unthinkable. S-type in control, though? That's just safe and sane. But in reality, not all D-types want total control by any means necessary. I could also see how a phrase like this might lead to that other ill-conceived concept in kink, topping from the bottom, aka the bottom calling all of the shots and bossing around the top. I don't think topping from the bottom is nearly the problem that people have made it out to be in the past, either in terms of severity or prominence, to be clear. But I could also totally see a newbie S-type being told they have all of the power and then taking that idea and running with it in the worst way possible. Now, this is where I get into what I think about this, what I think is a better alternative to this phrase, because in my humble opinion, it is not that the submissive is the one in control or that the dom is the one in control implicitly. Neither are absolutely true. They both have power. They both are in control. They both create the space together in which DS lives. They both contribute to negotiations, both put their desires and needs on the table, and they can both walk away at any time. I have long said that negotiating for dominance and submission has to start from an egalitarian base. You have to respect each other and see each other as equals, and then decide the terms under which your relationship will become intentionally unequal. This is often assumed to mean the dominant has to view the S-type as more than just a slab of meat, but it also means the S-type has to view the dominant as a human being too. If we are going to make any kind of absolute statement, maybe it should be this: both the dominant and the submissive have power. Radical idea, I know. And the psychological reality may feel different, of course. Maybe you know your D-type has a safe word and limits, but they never really come up, so they fade into the background. Maybe you technically know that you can walk away. Maybe you know that you can technically walk away from the relationship at any time, but you've had enough conditioning to where that doesn't feel like it's the case day to day, even if it is there as a failsafe. All of that is still true, but underneath all of the role play and titles and training is a relationship in which both people are putting in roughly equal effort. They both show up, they both get vulnerable, they both do the work. There needs to be symmetry even when it externally appears unequal as a result. Some people will argue that this statement doesn't really make sense though, because a submissive choosing to be submissive is the push that starts the engine of DS running. That submission creates the space for a dominant to be dominant. After all, you can't force someone to be submissive, right? That would be abuse, but you also can't force someone to be dominant either. The dominant has to choose to accept submission. Also, for the circle to be complete, for the dance to begin, who is to say that the circle has to start with the S-type offering their submission? Could it not just as easily begin with the D-type offering an opportunity to submit? What about when it's the S-type who approaches first and has to wait for the dom to respond? Does the D-type not also make space in which a submissive can be who they are? Submission can't exist in a vacuum after all. How many wannabe subs spend years and years giving and giving their energy to people who do not want it, who can't even tell it's there, let alone honor it? This is why it's an exchange, a dance, a circle. Both the submissive and the dominant need each other to be fully who they are and what they are with each other. They both put energy in, they both get energy out. Where this begins and ends is less discreet than simply looking at the submissive kneeling for the first time and going, ah yes, now that is power exchange. But that's my theory. I think how one feels internally about it varies person to person. Some people will feel like the S-type is really the one in charge, and for others they will think it's obviously the D-type. But at the end of the day, if we're doing BDSM that is based on mutual respect and trust, both people will retain some residual degree of autonomy, even if it's been obscured. But all of this got me thinking, where did this phrase come from? Why did we all start repeating this as though it were self-evidently true? I like to hunt down these little historical BDSM oddities if I can, because half the time they're neither as old nor as universally accepted as one might assume. When I began my search to try and figure out where this notion originated, I knew it had to have been something that somebody first said before 2015, because I remember hearing it even when I was a brand new baby kinkster on the internet. And so I eventually came across Master Arcane's article on the topic, which pointed to it having an origin around the mid-1990s. And by the way, if you like this video, you really should give that one a read, because we are very much of the same mind about this topic, even if they have a different way of approaching it than I do here. And so, in any case, with a little advanced Google search magic, I was able to find progressively older and older articles and web pages referencing this phrase. First, it was 2005, then 2001, and so on. And I eventually came across an old message board debate from 2001 titled, "Who's Really in Control in a Master-Slave Relationship?" One user, Sister Coyote, remarked, ultimately, in a healthy DS relationship, control should probably be in the hands of the S. Another, Mockingbird, added, the ultimate control is always in the hands of the slave in a modern BDSM relationship. Both of these takes were contested, however. Other users stated that control really runs along a continuum, and that some people want to give up as much real control as possible, and others not so much. As you can imagine would happen on a discussion board from the turn of the millennium, things got both pretty heated and off topic quickly. But one thing that really perked up my ears was Mockingbird stating that they had written a column about their personal views on BDSM around 1995. Could this be our 1990s source? I wasn't able to find any other names this user was associated with since they were posting as a guest, but I was able to find an article from fall 1996, which may be our smoking gun. Quote, "Bound and Shagged, The Pleasures of Dominance and Submission" by Naughty Girl appeared in the online edition of the Daily Gazette, an independent local newspaper from New York. The article states, quote, "The submissive allows the dominant to have power in their situation. The submissive willingly decides to give their power over to the dominant. And, interestingly, in this situation, the submissive almost has more power," explaining that this is the case because, quote, "the dominant, in breaking the submissive's trust, will lose the sub. And because DS is based on willing submission, the sub has the power to stop whenever they desire." All of these ideas are things we see repeated in the modern day. I have no way to prove for sure that this is the first article to ever go over the subject or that this belongs to the Mockingbird from that forum, but the timeline does fit, and it's the oldest thing I was able to find on Google search, which isn't necessarily saying much. While the kink community was very alive and well on the internet in the 90s, very little of it remains preserved and easily accessible. It could well be that this idea first germinated on a Usenet forum or some other more obscure place online. I was able to find, for example, an IRC conversation from October 96, right around when the Daily Gazette article was published, preserved on the Iron Gate. In it, they remarked, quote, "Submissives acquire the misconception that they are in control from a number of sources. One is the scene, many of whose citizens spend a lot of time spreading this propaganda. Not only do well-known scene personalities intone in that certain voice that means they are imparting a great wisdom, that the submissive is always ultimately in charge, but the heavy promotion of safe words, negotiation, and slave contracts, in which the submissive makes it absolutely clear what she will or will not do, gives newcomers the distinct impression that the powerlessness of the submissive in a power exchange is a sham." This sure sounds like it could be a retort to our article, but who knows? Maybe it was simply a trendy topic at the time. Maybe the article was rehashing something that a larger, bigger voice had already said. Although it seems that the identity of the voice is lost to time, so we don't really know. I could not find any reference to the phrase in the books I have that would have come out around that time originally, like 1995's Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns, or 96's SM 101, although I could have missed a related idea that was phrased somewhat differently than that formula that gets repeated today. So maybe I wasn't able to uncover where exactly this phrase came from, but I think I did get pretty close. What I found more interesting, though, was to see that, as is so often the case, we are merely rehashing arguments that our community was having decades ago. I suppose the younger generation always thinks that they're inventing the wheel for the first time ever and not just merely reinventing it because they don't know their history. This was not taken as gospel nearly as much as I thought, and anywhere it popped up, people would argue about it. I doubt it's going anywhere anytime soon, though. I mean, it's lasted this long already, but the fact we are still debating it ought to tell you how much utility it really has in the long run. And that is the answer to the question, do submissives really have all the power? And unsatisfyingly, I suppose in the end, it really does just depend on your personal perspective. But hopefully now I have given you an idea of the arguments for it. I have given you the history. And now maybe you can make a decision about whether or not you think this holds true for you and the way that you want to approach BDSM. I would hear thoughts about this one in a comment down below. I am going to be doing sort of a back to basics power exchange series because I have not talked about things like submissive training or punishments or reward protocols in like 4 or 5 years on my channel, and we need to revisit them. So if you want to stick around for those, please go ahead and subscribe because I make videos every week talking about kink and BDSM, as well as relationships and many other fun topics. And if you really want to support what I do, the best way to do is with Patreon. Link to that will be down below. If you do already support me there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.